It is Friday, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for a very special coin medal. Because, of course, today is Slayer, and so we won't be able to do our show at our normal time of 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, because hopefully I will be up to my elbows in people and having a really, really good time to offset the shit time that the Bitcoin ATM operator fucking dealt me this morning. You know, sometimes I wonder about crypto, you know, if it's really worth it. You know, if dealing with all the bullshit is really worth it. I've done enough things in crypto that I couldn't have done with regular currencies that I know the answer to that at the deepest level is yes. Because, like I've said here on this show a multitude of times, is that regardless of what is happening right now in crypto, that within a decade, we will be back to the point where we were, say back in like 2014, 2015, where the average person, such as you or I, could cobble together our own Genesis block and issue out our software for people to mine our software, our coin, and put out the software for our wallets and start a new world economy. And I expect that will be true regardless of what happens right now. But for the meantime, we're still living in the suck-ass 1950s where we're so worried about terrorism and drug trafficking and illicit transactions and all this other bullshit that we've pretty much put ourselves in an open-air prison economically. And I find that to be a real shame, especially given the capabilities that cryptocurrencies have. You know, it was a concern of mine to begin with when I first got into cryptocurrencies back in 2009, that eventually they would be worked around to where it would basically be like Mark of the Beast, where you wouldn't be able to transact without everybody fucking knowing, and you know, and you wouldn't be able to buy certain things because, oh well, you know, the money can't support that kind of thing. And we've pretty much gotten back around to exactly that. I do think, though, that this is only true for trying to interface with fiat and trying to do exchanges between the two. And I think that's the real danger that we do have with cryptocurrencies, is bringing fiat currencies into our realm. I think we should only use them as initial markers of value, you know, and that they should, I don't know, based on their distribution versus our currencies, fluctuate in value, but like only be an original marker, that we don't actually use it to convert our cryptocurrencies into fiat currencies at all. Just kind of stay on the outside, you know. In any case, I am going to finish off the last 17 pages of, I think it's HB 3364, yeah, or HR 3364. Yeah, we're going to kill this fucking thing today, get rid of it, or at least finish reading it. And, yeah, I had to dial back to a couple pages to figure out exactly where I was. Let's see here, Ukrainian situation. I'm not going to read it right off the bat, though. I'm going to, we'll get to it, but not right off the bat. I want to go ahead and throw in some music to begin with, and get our first dance going and all that. And then we will dive in on page 43 of 70 of HR 3364. And so for the moment, for our first dance, you know, I was listening to this song, and I really dig this fucking album, man. The whole thing is pretty damn good. I think there's maybe one song there is just like, but like for the rest of it, it's a solid fucking release. I do not know how Tommy does it. Anyway, here it is off of 0 Days, Inner Being, here on Coin Metal. And that was Bleed by Meshuggah. We went a little bit long on the music there because, well, I needed a little more of it, you know? Got in kind of a foul mood because I'm looking forward to going to Slayer and shit. Was hoping to be able to buy a shirt and whatnot. But unfortunately, all my liquid capital is fucking Bitcoin at the moment. And so, you know, like I said, I had the money in the ATM, and unfortunately, there's supposedly some sort of federal regulation, or at least that's what the operator was claiming, that says that they can't give me over $1,000 in a 30-day period. Now, I don't understand the rationale behind that, in all honesty. It's like, oh, you know, if you're beyond subsistence, which is about $1,000 a month, you know, oh fuck, you've got to be a fucking terrorist, man. We gotta put a clamp down on you. Fuck, it just pisses me off, man. This technology doesn't need my identification. It doesn't need my phone number. It doesn't need any of that bullshit in order to work reliably. And in commerce, what the fuck do you really give a fuck about? Do you care what I do with my genitalia? Do you care who I voted for? Do you care what my blood type is? Do you care where I live, what country I'm from? No! You don't give a fuck about any of that shit. If you're a merchant, not a fucking spy or agent for the government, all you really give a fuck about is, does the fucking transaction clear? Is the money in my account? Did the fucking product get to the person I sent it to? If the answers to these questions are yes and yes, that's all you give a fuck about. Fuck all this other bullshit. Fucking sick of it. You know, and the reason why I'm quote unquote sick of it is because there's no reason for it. You know, I mean, you know, let's live like a cage is the ultimate destination for everything that we fucking do. You know, let's make a fucking law that outlaws everything. You know, let's make life itself fucking illegal. Because you know what, they basically done that in New York. You know, I mean, you take the step on the wrong piece of pavement at the wrong time of day, fuck. You get billed, you get nailed, they put you in jail. I just saw something the other day, fucking John Stossel did this thing, where, I don't know how many times it's happened, but apparently it's happened enough times that John Stossel bothered to investigate it, about people who the TSA stopped in the airport, I guess either coming in or going out, I'm not sure, with an empty magazine. One person was put in jail because they had a firearm in their bag. Now, that in itself is, you know, you could explain it away, but what made these particular ones such an issue is that these people had notified the airport that they were going to be bringing their firearm through, asked what they had to do to comply with the regulations that TSA, New York, all that other business go by, and followed the instructions to a T. And they were still given felony charges in New York. They were still arrested and detained in the state of New York. Now, it's an indication of the fucking gulag state that they've allowed New York to be turned into. And they intend to do that everywhere. They have been doing it everywhere. And you fucking people don't fight it at all. You just kind of roll over and, it doesn't impact me here on the couch with my remote, so it doesn't matter. Fuck. You go ahead and you step outside the door, all of a sudden you're subject to it, man. You fucking park in the wrong spot. You You say the wrong thing to the wrong person. You say bomb in the wrong context. Fuck, you're in jail. I mean, does this sound like freedom to anybody? I mean, can you exist under those kind of conditions for 24 hours a day and say to yourself, gosh, I feel so free. I feel so free. I mean, this is freedom. This is what the future is all about. It's all about a fucking computer that spies on me, and a TV that's a computer that's hooked up to the internet that spies on me, and a phone that's hooked up to the internet that's got a camera and some microphones that spies on me. In my bank, it reports on me if I make weird transactions or if I transact with the wrong people. Oh, I feel so free. It fucking disgusts me that you fucking people tolerate this shit. Really, it does. I mean, if I had some other way of dealing with it that didn't involve some sort of kinetic violence that would make me look like a fucking rampaging lunatic on the 7 o'clock news, I'd be that much more tempted to engage in it. I gotta tell you. Anyway, today we are going to finish off House Resolution 3364, and I'd really like y'all to pay attention to the wording, because this shit applies to you. You know, we've already passed through some material here that if these people were serious about prosecuting this thing to the nth of the law, like, at least 30% of crypto would be in jail tomorrow. At least 30%. Anybody who's participated in like Bolivia or Venezuela or whatever and trying to help them improve their economy, you're facilitating the enemy. It's a treasonous action, and they put you in jail. And you have to hope like hell that President Trump thinks that the shit doesn't actually apply to you. I mean, like Vitalik Buterin, he met with fucking Vladimir Putin last month. According to this shit, he's a fucking traitor. Because he was helping them he was helping them with their economic and monetary infrastructure. So, according to this shit, it would make him a criminal. Come on, people. Wake the fuck up. This shit's going to apply to you whether you imagine it does or not. Because if they do put this into law, somebody else will imagine it applies to you. Anyway. Continuing on, page 43, section 254, coordinating aid and assistance across Europe and Eurasia. A. Authorization of appropriations. There are authorized to be appropriated for the Countering Russian Influence Fund $250 million for fiscal years 2018 and 19. B. Use of funds. Amounts in the Countering Russian Influence Fund shall be used to effectively implement, prioritized in the following order and subject to the availability of funds, the following goals. Number 1. To assist in protecting critical infrastructure and electoral mechanisms from cyber attacks in the following countries. A. Countries that are members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization or the European Union that the Secretary of State determines, number 1, are vulnerable to influence by the Russian Federation, and number 2, lack the economic capability to effectively respond to aggression by the Russian Federation without the support of the United States. B. Countries that are participating in the enlargement process of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization or the European Union, including Albania, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Georgia, Macedonia, Moldova, Kosovo, Serbia, and Ukraine. Number 2, to combat corruption, improve the rule of law, and otherwise strengthen independent judiciaries and prosecutors' general offices in the countries described in paragraph 1. Number 3, to respond to the humanitarian crisis and instability caused by or aggravated by the invasions and occupations of Georgia and Ukraine by the Russian Federation. Number 4, To improve participatory legislative processes and legal education, political transparency and competition, and compliance with international obligations in the countries described in paragraph 1. Number 5, to build the capacity of civil society, media, and other non-governmental organizations countering the influence and propaganda of the Russian Federation to combat corruption, prioritize access to truthful information, and operate freely in all regions in the countries described in paragraph 1. 6. To assist the Secretary of State in executing the functions specified in Section 1287B of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2017, Public Law 114-328, 22 U.S.C. 2656 Note. For the purposes of recognizing, understanding, exposing, and countering propaganda and disinformation effects by foreign governments, in coordinations with the relevant regional assistant secretary or assistant secretaries of the Department of State. Revision of Revision of activities for which amounts may be used. The Secretary of State may modify the goals described in subsection B if, not later than 15 days before revising such a goal, the Secretary notifies the appropriate congressional committee of the revision. D. Implementation. Number 1. In general, the Secretary of State shall, acting through the Coordinator of the United States Assistance to Europe and Eurasia, authorized pursuant to Section 601 of the Support for East European Democracy SEED Act of 1989, 22 U.S.C. 5461, and Section 102 of the Freedom for Russia and Emerging Eurasian Democracies and Open Market Support Act of 1992, 22 U.S.C. 5812, and in consultation with the Administrator for the United States Agency for International Development and Director of the Global Engagement Center of the Department of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Broadcasting Board of Governors, and the heads of other relevant federal agencies coordinate and carry out activities to achieve the goals described in subsection B. 2. Method. Activities to achieve the goals described in subsection B shall be carried out through A. Initiatives of the United States government, and B. Federal grant programs such as the Information Access Fund, or C. Non-governmental or international organizations such as the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the National Endowment for Democracy, the Black Sea Trust, the Balkan Trust for Democracy, the Prague Civil Society Center, the National Atlantic Treaty Organization Strategic Communications Center of Excellence, the European Endowment for Democracy, and related organizations. 3. Report on implementation. A. In general, not later than April 1st of each year, the Secretary of State, acting through the Coordinator of United States Assistance to Europe and Eurasia, shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report on the programs and activities carried out to achieve the goals described in subsection B during the preceding fiscal year. B. Elements. Each report required by subparagraph A shall include, with respect to each program or activity described in that subparagraph, 1. The amount of funding for the program or activity. Number 2. The goal described in subsection B to which the program or activity relates. And number 3. An assessment of whether or not the goal was met. E. Coordination with global partners. Number 1. In general, to maximize cost efficiency, eliminate duplication, and speed the achievement of the goals described in subsection B, the Secretary of State shall ensure coordination with A, the European Union and its institutions, B, the governments of countries that are members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization or the European Union, and C, international organizations and quasi-governmental funding entities that carry out programs and activities that seek to accomplish the goals described in subsection B. 2. Report by Secretary of State. Not later than April 1st of each year, the Secretary of State shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report that includes A, the amount of funding provided to each country referred to in subsection B by 1. The European Union or its institutions, 2. The government of each country that is a member of the European Union or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and 3. International organizations and quasi-governmental funding entities that carry out programs and activities that seek to accomplish the goals described in subsection B, and B, an assessment of whether the funding described in subparagraph A is commensurate with funding provided by the United States for those goals. F. Rule of construction. Nothing in this section shall be construed to apply or to limit United States foreign assistance not provided using amounts available in the Countering Russian Influence Fund. G. Ensuring adequate staffing for governance activities. In order to ensure that the United States government is properly focused on combating corruption, improving rule of law, and building the capacity of civil society, media, and other non-governmental organizations in countries described in subsection B1, the Secretary of State shall establish a pilot program for foreign service officer positions focused on governance and anti-corruption activities in such countries. Gosh, I hope they have one for the U.S. Section 255. Report on media organizations controlled and funded by the government of the Russian Federation. A. In general, not later than 90 days after the date of the enactment of this act and annually thereafter, the President shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report that includes a description of media organizations that are controlled and funded by the government of the Russian Federation and any affiliate entities, whether operating within or outside the Russian Federation, including broadcast and satellite-based television, radio, internet, and print media organizations. B. Form of report. The report required by subsection A shall be submitted in unclassified form, but may include a classified annex. Section 256. Report on Russia Federation influence on elections in Europe and Eurasia. A. In general, not later than 90 days after the date of the enactment of this act and annually thereafter, the President shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees and leadership a report on funds provided by or funds the use of which was directed by the government of the Russian Federation or any Russian person with the intention of influencing the outcome of any election or campaign in any country in Europe or Eurasia during the preceding year, including through direct support to any political party, candidate, lobbying campaign, non-governmental organization, or civic organization. B. Form of report. Each report required by subsection A shall be submitted in unclassified form, but may include a classified annex. C. Definitions. In this section, number 1, appropriate congressional committees and leadership. The term appropriate congressional committees and leadership means A. the Committee on Foreign Relations, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, the Committee on Armed Services, the Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, the Committee on Appropriations, the Select Committee on Intelligence, and the majority and minority leaders of the Senate, and B, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Committee on Financial Services, the Committee on Armed Services, the Committee on Homeland Security, the Committee on Appropriations, the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and the Speaker, the Majority Leader, and the Minority Leader of the House of Representatives. 2. Russian person. The term Russian person means A, an individual who is a citizen or national of the Russian Federation, or B, an entity organized under the laws of the Russian Federation or otherwise subject to the jurisdiction of the government of the Russian Federation. Section 257. Ukrainian Energy Security. A. Statement of Policy. It is the policy of the United States, number 1, to support the government of Ukraine in restoring its sovereign and territorial integrity. Number 2, to condemn and oppose all the destabilizing efforts by the government of the Russian Federation in Ukraine in violation of its obligations and international commitments. Number 3, to never recognize the illegal annexation of Crimea by the government of the Russian Federation or the separation of any portion of Ukrainian territory through the use of military force. Number 4, to deter the government of the Russian Federation from further destabilizing and invading Ukraine and other independent countries in Central and Eastern Europe and the Caucasus. Number 5, to assist in promoting reform in regulatory oversight and operations in Ukraine's energy sector, including the establishment and empowerment of an independent regulatory organization. Number 6, to encourage and support fair competition, market liberalization, and reliability in Ukraine's energy sector. Number 7, to help Ukraine and United States allies and partners in Europe reduce their dependence on Russian energy resources, especially natural gas, which the government of the Russian Federation uses as a weapon to coerce, intimidate, and influence other countries, entirely unlike the United States that only uses oil. 8, to work with European Union member states and European Union institutions to promote energy security through developing diversified and liberalized energy markets that provide diversified sources, suppliers, and routes. To continue to oppose the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, given its detrimental impacts on the European Union's energy security, gas market development in Central and Eastern Europe, and energy reforms in Ukraine. And number 10, that the United States government should prioritize the export of United States energy resources in order to create American jobs, help United States allies and partners, and strengthen United States foreign policy. You know, we could achieve all of that shit if you just get the fuck out of our way. Yeah, that's what I'm talking to you, federal government of the United States. Get the fuck out of the people's way, and we'll get all that shit taken care of. B, plan to promote energy security in Ukraine. Number 1, in general, the Secretary of State, in coordination with the Administrator of the United States Agency for International Development and Secretary of Energy, shall work with the government of Ukraine to develop a plan to increase energy security in Ukraine, increase the amount of energy produced in Ukraine, and reduce Ukraine's reliance on energy imports from the Russian Federation. Number 2, elements. The plan developed under paragraph 1 shall include strategies for market liberalization, effective regulation and oversight, supply diversification, energy reliability, and energy efficiency, such as through supporting A, the promotion of advanced technology and modern operating practices in Ukraine's oil and gas sector. B. Modern geophysical and meteorological survey work as needed, followed by international tenders to help attract qualified investment into exploration and development of areas with untapped resources in Ukraine. C. A broadening of Ukraine's electric power transmission interconnection with Europe. D. The strengthening of Ukraine's capability to maintain electric power grid stability and reliability. E. Independent regulatory oversight and operations of Ukraine's gas market and electricity sector. F. The implementation of primary gas law, including pricing, tariff structure, and legal regulatory implementation. G. The privatization of government-owned energy companies through credible legal frameworks and a transparent process compliant with international best practices. H. Procurement and transport of emergency fuel supplies, including reverse pipeline flows from Europe. I. Provision of technical assistance for crisis planning, crisis response, and public outreach. J. Repair of infrastructure to enable the transport of fuel supplies. K. Repair of power generating or power transmission equipment or facilities. And L. Improved building and energy efficiency and other measures designed to reduce energy demand in Ukraine. 3. Reports. A. Implementation of Ukraine Freedom Support Act of 2014 provisions. Not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this act, the Secretary of State shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report detailing the status of implementing the provisions required under Section 7C of the Ukraine Freedom Support Act of 2014, 22 U.S.C. 8926C, including detailing the plans required under that section, the level of funding that has been allocated to and expended for the strategies set forth under that section, and progress that has been made in implementing the strategies developed pursuant to that section. B. In general, not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this act and every 180 days thereafter, the Secretary of State shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report detailing the plan developed under paragraph 1, the level of funding that has been allocated to and expended for the strategies set forth in paragraph 2, and progress that has been made in implementing the strategies. C. Briefings. The Secretary of State or a designee of the Secretary shall brief the appropriate congressional committees not later than 30 days after the submission of each report under subparagraph B. In addition, the Department of State shall make relevant officials available upon request to brief the appropriate congressional committees on all available information that relates directly or indirectly to Ukraine or energy security in Eastern Europe. D. Appropriate congressional committees defined. In this paragraph, the term appropriate congressional committees means, number 1, the Committee on Foreign Relations and Committee on Appropriations of the Senate, and number 2, the Committee on Foreign Affairs and Committee on Appropriations of the House of Representatives. C. Supporting efforts of countries in Europe and Eurasia to decrease their dependence on Russian sources of energy. And for just a moment, I am going to pause right there because I'm feeling some yawns coming on, so I need to do some squats or something really quick here. And so we are going to do a quick little music break, and I do have a couple of songs left over from On 0 Days that we have not played yet. And so we'll go ahead and do that. And with regard to that one, I'm trying to think of which one to play. We haven't played that one. Operation of the Moral Law. That seems applicable, right? So here it is. Operation of the Moral Law by Prong. Brief music break. I'm going to get in 2 or 3 songs and then we'll get back to it. Here on Coin Metal. And that was Crowbar with a little bit of I Am Forever. And I just want to take a moment and respond to one of my adoring fans, Mr. Bobby DeBoeuf. My apologies on the pronunciation there, sir. I watched the show back on YouTube. Nice work. Sometimes hard to understand what you mean with some things, but that is my problem. I'm Dutch. Haha. Nice work, though. Thank you very much. We are live now. RioCrypto.com. Alright. So, and for some stupid reason, like when I look up audio on this program, it like finds everything. I mean like everything. Like system sounds, like fucking dial-ups and shit. Everything. And so every once in a while I have to like go through, and if I do click on audio on it, I have to go through and take out everything that I don't intend to play, you know, that, like I said, like system sounds and shit like that. It's all weird. Anyway, let's get back into this legislation because I'm eager to kill this bad boy. And we are on page 48 of 70, so we may get that done very, very soon. Alright, and let's see, where were we in here? We went all the way through that implementation of Ukraine Freedom Act of 214 provisions, be general, and here it is. C, supporting efforts in Europe and Eurasia to decrease their dependence on Russian sources of energy. Number 1, findings. Congress makes the following findings. A, the government of the Russian Federation uses its strong position in the energy sector as leverage to manipulate the internal politics and foreign relations of the countries of Europe and Eurasia. B, the influence is based not only on the Russian Federation's oil and natural gas resources, but also on its state-owned nuclear power and electricity companies. Number 2, sense of Congress. It is the sense of Congress that A, the United States should assist the efforts of the countries of Europe and Eurasia to enhance their energy security through diversification of energy supplies in order to lessen dependencies on Russian Federation energy resources and state-owned entities. And B, the Export-Import Bank of the United States and the Overseas Private Investment Corporation should play key roles in supporting critical energy projects that contribute to that goal. Number 3, use of Countering Russian Influence Fund to provide technical assistance. Amounts in the Countering Russian Influence Fund pursuant to the Section 254 shall be used to provide technical advice to countries described in subsection B1 of the section designed to enhance energy security and lessen dependence on energy from Russian Federation sources. D, authorization of appropriations. There is authorized to be appropriated for the Department of State a total of $30 million for fiscal years 2018 and 19 to carry out strategies set forth in subsection B2 and other activities under this section related to the promotion of energy security in Ukraine. E, rule of construction. Nothing in this section shall be construed as affecting the responsibilities required and authorities provided under Section 7 of the Ukraine Freedom Support Act of 2014, 22 U.S.C. 8926. Section 256, termination. 258, my apologies. The provisions of this subtitle shall terminate on the date that is 5 years after the date of the enactment of this act. Section 259, appropriate congressional committees defined. Except as otherwise provided in this subtitle, the term appropriate congressional committees means, number one, the Committee on Foreign Relations, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, the Committee on Armed Services, the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, the Committee on Appropriations, and the Select Committee on Intelligence of the Senate, and number two, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Committee on Financial Services, the Committee on Armed Services, the Committee on Homeland Security, the Committee on Appropriations, and the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence of the House of Representatives. Subtitle C, combating terrorism and illicit financing. And all right, folks, we're on page 50 of 70. We've mined through to page 50, okay? And in the part here, part 1, National Strategy for Combating Terrorism and Other Illicit Financing, I believe these are the provisions that will most likely impact us in crypto. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to take a special note and time, and I'm going to put this up in here. Well, no, not there. That was a private message. Here. Hit it. And I gotta do a little subtitle here in the old Telegram. And let's see here. What should I write? 10th part, starting on page 50. RadioCrypto.com. Alright. And so, we're about to jump into it here. Subtitle C, Combating Terrorism and Illicit Financing. Part 1, National Strategy for Combating Terrorism and Other Illicit Financing. Section 261, Development of National Strategy. A. In general, the President, acting through the Secretary, shall, in consultation with the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Director of National Intelligence, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, and the appropriate federal banking agencies and federal functional regulators, develop a national strategy for combating the financing of terrorism and other related forms of illicit finance. B. Transmittal to Congress. Number 1. In general, not later than 1 year after the date of the enactment of this act, the President shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a comprehensive national strategy developed in accordance with subsection A. 2. Updates. Not later than January 31st, 2020 and January 31st, 2022, the President shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees updated versions of the national strategy submitted under paragraph 1. C. Separate presentation of classified material. Any part of the national strategy that involves information that is properly classified under criteria established by the President shall be submitted to Congress separately in a classified annex and if requested by the chairman or ranking member of one of the appropriate congressional committees, as a briefing at an appropriate level of security. Section 262, Contents of National Strategy. The strategy described in Section 261 shall contain the following. Number 1, evaluation of existing efforts. An assessment of the effectiveness of and ways in which the United States is currently addressing the highest levels of risk of various forms of illicit finance, including those identified in the documents entitled 2015 National Money Laundering Risk Assessment and 2015 National Terrorist Financing Risk Assessment, published by the Department of the Treasury, and a description of how the strategy is integrated into and supports the broader counterterrorism strategy of the United States. Number 2, goals, objectives, and priorities. A comprehensive, research-based, long-range, quantifiable decision of goals, objectives, and priorities for, quote, disrupting and preventing illicit finance activities within and transiting the financial system of the United States that outlines priorities to reduce the incidence, dollar value, and effects of illicit finance. Number 3, threats. An identification of the most significant illicit finance threats to the financial system of the United States. 4, reviews and proposed changes. Reviews of enforcement efforts, relevant regulations, and relevant provisions of law, and, if appropriate, discussions of proposed changes determined to be appropriate to ensure that the United States pursues coordinated and effective efforts at all levels of government and with international partners of the United States in the fight against illicit finance. 5. Detection and prosecution initiatives. A description of efforts to improve as necessary detection and prosecution of illicit finance, including efforts to ensure that a. subject to legal restrictions, all appropriate data collected by the federal government that is relevant to the efforts described in this section be available in a timely fashion to 1. all appropriate federal departments and agencies, and number 2, as appropriate and consistent with Section 314 of the International Money Laundering Abatement and Financial Anti-Terrorism Act of 2001, 31 U.S.C. 5311, note, to financial institutions to assist the financial institutions in efforts to comply with laws aimed at curbing illicit finance, and B, appropriate efforts are undertaken to ensure that federal departments and agencies charged with reducing and preventing illicit finance make thorough use of publicly available data in furtherance of this effort. Blockchains. 6. The role of the private financial sector in prevention of illicit finance. Oh, you mean like not letting me get more than $1,000 out of a fucking Bitcoin ATM? I'm a fucking terrorist, man! Give me a fucking break. Ugh! Makes me want to just grab somebody by the throat and just strangle the shit out of them. A discussion of ways to enhance partnerships between the private financial sector and the federal departments and agencies with regard to the prevention and detection of illicit finance, including A, efforts to facilitate compliance with laws aimed at stopping such illicit finance while maintaining the effectiveness of such efforts, and B, providing guidance to strengthen internal controls and to adopt on an industry-wide basis more effective policies. The integration of facial recognition, I'm sure. Can't be having you use those burner phones. 7. Enactment of intergovernmental cooperation. A discussion of ways to combat illicit finance by enhancing A, Cooperative efforts between and among federal, state, and local officials, including state regulators, state and local prosecutors, and other law enforcement officials. And B, cooperative efforts with and between governments of countries and with and between multinational institutions with expertise in fighting illicit finance, including the Financial Action Task Force and Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units. 8. Trend analysis of emerging illicit finance threats. A discussion of and data regarding trends in illicit finance, including evolving forms of value transfer such as so-called cryptocurrencies and other methods that are computer telecommunications or internet-based cybercrime or any other threats that the Secretary may choose to identify. 9. Budget priorities. A multi-year budget plan that identifies sufficient resources needed to successfully execute the full range of missions called for in this section. Number 10. Technology enhancements. An analysis of current and developing ways to leverage technology to improve the effectiveness of efforts to stop the financing of terrorism and other forms of illicit finance, including better integration of open source data. Oh man, you guys are gonna end up fucking copying and pasting fucking malware into official shit, man. I only say that because a lot of the open source community like copies and pastes other people's shit, right? They don't actually read through all of the code. They just copy and paste it. Well, that's what these guys are gonna end up doing. They're gonna end up fucking copy and pasting some fucking malware into some shit. Part 2. Enhancing anti-terrorism tools of the Department of the Treasury. 271. Improving anti-terror finance monitoring of funds transfers. A. Study. In general, to improve the ability of the Department of the Treasury to better track cross-border fund transfers and identify potential financing of terrorist or other forms of illicit finance. The Secretary shall carry out a study to assess A. The potential efficacy of requiring banking regulators to establish a pilot program to provide technical assistance to depository institutions and credit unions that wish to provide account services to money services businesses serving individuals in Somalia. B. Whether such a pilot program could be a model for improving the ability of the United States persons to make legitimate funds transfers through transparent and easily monitored channels while preserving strict compliance with the Bank Secrecy Act. Public Law 91-508-84, Stat 1114, and related controls aimed at stopping money laundering and the financing of terrorism. And C. Consistent with current legal requirements regarding confidential supervisory information, the potential impact of allowing money services businesses to share certain state examination information with depository institutions and credit unions, or whether another appropriate mechanism could be identified to allow a similar exchange of information to give the depository institutions and credit unions a better understanding of whether an individual money services business is adequately meeting its anti-money laundering and counter-terror financing obligations to combat money laundering, the financing of terror, or related illicit finance. These fucking people are... Oh my god. I can't believe that they think that they can actually do that. I mean, with regard to cryptocurrencies, I can think of at least 4 ways that I can transmit money to any volume of money that I have to anybody else on fucking planet Earth that knows how to receive it. And so, and to my knowledge, nobody could stop it because they're not based on linear systems or connected systems for that matter. It's kind of funny shit, really. Anyway, continuing on. Let's see, where did we leave off here? In credit unions, better understanding. 2, public input. The Secretary should solicit and consider public input as appropriate in developing the study required under subsection A. Dude, we should volunteer and get paid for it. Be like, dude, I'll give you, if you give me like $50,000 a day, I'll advise you on this shit. But I want it in Bitcoin or Verge. B, report. Not later than 270 days after the date of the enactment of this act, the Secretary shall submit to the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs and the Committee on Foreign Relations of the Senate and the Committee on Financial Services and the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the House of Representatives a report that contains all findings and determinations made in carrying out the study required under subsection A. Section 272, Sense of Congress on International Cooperation Regarding Terrorist Financing Intelligence. It is the sense of Congress that the Secretary, acting through the Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Crimes, should intensify work with foreign partners to help the foreign partners develop intelligence analytic capabilities in a financial intelligence unit, finance ministry, or other appropriate agency that are, number 1, commensurate to the threats faced by the foreign partner, and number 2, designed to better integrate intelligence efforts with the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing regimes of the foreign partner. Section 273. Examining the counter-terror financing role of the Department of the Treasury in embassies. Not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this act, the Secretary shall submit to the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs and the Committee on Foreign Relations of the Senate and the Committee on Financial Services and the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the House of Representatives a report that contains, number 1, a list of the United States embassies in which a full-time Department of the Treasury financial attaché is stationed, and a description of how the interests of the Department of the Treasury relating to terrorist financing and money laundering are addressed via regional attachés or otherwise at United States embassies where no such attachés are present. Number 2, a list of the United States embassies at which the Department of the Treasury has assigned a technical assistance advisor from the Office of Technical Assistance of the Department of the Treasury. Number 3, an overview of how the Department of the Treasury financial attachés and technical assistance advisors assist in efforts to counter illicit finance, to include money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing, and, number 4, an overview of patterns, trends, or other issues identified by the Department of the Treasury and whether resources are sufficient to address those issues. And they are all going to find out that no, they are not sufficient. There is no amount of money that will make it sufficient. That is why other countries have given up already. Give up. Forget about it. Just forget about it. Anyway, continuing on. We're on page 53 for those who are following along or trying to anyway. And we are on section 274, inclusion of Secretary of the Treasury on National Security Council. A, in general. Section 101C1 of the National Security Act of 1947, 50 U.S.C. 3021C1, is amended by inserting, quote, the Secretary of the Treasury before, quote, and such other officers, B, rule of construction. The amendment made by subsection A may not be construed to authorize the National Security Council to have a professional staff level that exceeds the limitations set forth under Section 101E3 of the National Security Act of 1947, 50 U.S.C. 3021E3. Section 275, inclusion of all funds. A, in general. Section 5326 of Title 31 United States Code is amended, number 1, in the heading of such section by striking, quote, coin and currency. Number 2, in subsection A by striking, quote, subtitle and inserting subtitle or to, and B, in paragraph 1A, by striking, quote, United States coins or currency or such other monetary instruments as the Secretary may describe in such order, and inserting, quote, funds as the Secretary may describe in such order. And number 3, in subsection B, A, in paragraph 1A by striking, quote, coins or currency or monetary instruments and inserting, quote, funds, and B, in paragraph 2 by striking, quote, coins or currency or other such monetary instruments as the Secretary may describe in the regulation or order, and inserting, quote, funds as the Secretary may describe in the regulation or order. B, clerical amendment. The table of contents for Chapter 53, Title 31 United States Code is amended in the item related to Section 5326 by striking, quote, coin and currency. Part 3, definitions. Section 281. Definitions. In the subtitle number 1, the term, quote, appropriate congressional committees means A, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, the Committee on Foreign Relations, Committee on Armed Services, Committee on the Judiciary, Committee on the Homeland Security, Governmental Affairs, and the Select Committee on Intelligence of the Senate, and B, the Committee on Financial Services, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Committee on Armed Services, the Committee on the Judiciary, the Committee on Homeland Security, and the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence of the House of Representatives. Number 2, the term appropriate federal banking agencies has the meaning given the term in Section 3 of the Federal Deposit Insurance Act, 12 U.S.C. 1813. Number 3, the term Bank Secrecy Act means A, Section 21 of the Federal Deposit Insurance Act, 12 U.S.C. 1829b. And scrolling down. B, in Chapter 2 of Title 1 of Public Law 91-508, 12 U.S.C. 1951, and C, Subchapter 2 of Chapter 53 of Title 31, United States Code. Number 4, the term federal functional regulator has the meaning given the term in Section 509 of the Bliley Act, 15 U.S.C. 6809. Number 5, the term illicit finance means the financing of terrorism, narcotics trafficking or proliferation, money laundering, or other forms of illicit financing domestically or internationally as defined by the President. Number 6, the term money service business has the meaning given the term under Section 1010.100 of Title 31 Code of Federal Regulations. Number 7, the term, quote, secretary means the Secretary of the Treasury, and 8, the term state means each of the several states of the District of Columbia and each territory or possession of the United States. And I'm going to have to do a brief pause here at subtitle D, Rule of Construction. It's just slightly beyond my control here. Anyway, I am going to hook you guys up with a little bit of 0 days before I bail out for just a moment. And of course, it'll be some new stuff. It may play more than one song, but you know, I'll update the Twitter feed after the fact. But we're going to start off with Self-Righteous Indignation, and again, we're on page 54 of 70, subtitled D, Rule of Construction, and that's where we will be picking up on the other side. But for right now, Self-Righteous Indignation by Prong off of 0 Days, here on Coin Metal. And that was Compulsive Future Projection. And yeah, I dedicated that one just to you guys that you refuse to hodl, man. You're sitting there watching that chart, and the slightest little up, the slightest little down. Oh, we're going to the moon! Oh my God, I'm losing my ass! You know, I mean, you can only play that manic game with yourself for so long before you're just like, you know what, it looks like it might go down, so I'm just going to go ahead and put in a buy order down where I think it's going to go to, and then I'm going to just log out and forget about it for a while, and, you know, come back in a couple days, check it, oh my goodness, it cleared, I bought, okay, you know, well, you know, from here, what's the most ludicrous price projection I can think of from where we're at right here for maybe like the 2 or 3 day trend? Oh, well, this price looks good. Let's go ahead and put that in for sell, and then log out and walk the fuck away and come back in 2 or 3 days. Oh my goodness, my sell cleared. Jesus Christ, people. Or better yet, get a bot to do it for you. Get the fuck away from the monitor. You know, I mean, I've not gotten to the point where I'm using a bot, which is stupid on my part. I know. I should be using bots and trading while I'm not here and making money while I'm making money. I understand that. I just haven't engaged in it because I'm not terribly comfortable with the concept at this moment. You know, because like we just saw, like that flash crash, a lot of people's bots were fucking losing money for them on that ship. And they're still in negative territory at this moment, even though that Ethereum had rebounded quite a bit since then. Just the same, they're still down like at least 25, maybe 30%, some of them. And so that kind of wanes my confidence with the idea of trading with a bot. But that's just me. Anyway, let's go ahead and get back into this legislation and kill this fucking bad boy, because they're into the part, or the parts that are actually important to us here in crypto. Subtitle D, Rule of Construction. Section 291, Rule of Construction. Nothing in this title or the amendments made by this title other than sections 216 and 236b shall be construed to limit the authority of the President under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S.C. 1701. Section 292. Sense of Congress on the strategic importance of Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. A. Findings. Congress makes the following findings. Number 1. The principle of collective defense of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is immortalized in Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, in which members pledge that, quote, an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all. Give me a fucking break, dude. If you're continuing to expand into other people's territories, and one of the fucking people that you meant, or one of the territories that you've claimed gets attacked, and you're all obligated to attack the aggressor, give me a break. It's like, let's make Libya part of NATO. Number 2. For almost 7 decades, the principle of collective defense has effectively served as a strategic deterrent for the member nations of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and provided stability throughout the world, strengthening the security of the United States and all 28 member nations. Number 3. Following the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks in New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania, the Alliance agreed to invoke Article 5 for the first time, affirming its commitment to collective defense. Number 4. Countries that are members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization have made historic contributions and sacrifices while combating terrorism in Afghanistan through the International Security Assistance Force and the Resolute Support Mission. Number 5. The recent attacks in the United Kingdom underscore the importance of an international alliance to combat hostile nation-states and terrorist groups. Number 6. At the 2014 NATO Summit in Wales, the member countries of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization decided that all countries that are members of NATO would spend an amount equal to 2% of their gross domestic product on defense by 2024. 7. Collective defense unites the 29 members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, each committing to protecting and supporting one another from external adversaries, which bolsters the North Atlantic Alliance. B. Sense of Congress. It is the sense of Congress, number 1, to express the vital importance of Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, the Charter of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, as it continues to serve as a critical deterrent to potential hostile nations and terrorist organizations. Number 2, to remember the first and only invocation of Article 5 by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in support of the United States after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. Number 3, to affirm that the United States remains fully committed to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and will honor its obligations enshrined in Article 5. And number 4, to condemn any threat to the sovereignty, territorial integrity, freedom, or democracy of any country that is a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, wait a minute. Does that also count when they select people that we don't necessarily like? I mean, that is kind of a result of democracy sometimes. Title 3. Sanctions with respect to North Korea. Section 301, short title. This title may be cited as the, quote, Korean Interdiction and Modernization of Sanctions Act. Section 302, definitions. A. Amendments to definitions in the North Korea Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016. Number 1. Applicable Executive Order. Section 31A of the North Atlantic Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9202 1A, is amended. A. By striking, quote, or Executive Order 13694 and inserting, quote, Executive Order number 13694, and B. By inserting, quote, or Executive Order 13722, 50 U.S.C. 1701 note, relating to blocking the property of the government of North Korea and the Workers' Party of Korea and prohibiting certain transactions with respect to North Korea before, quote, to the extent. 2. Applicable United Nations Security Council Resolution, Section 32A of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9202 2A, is amended by striking, quote, or 2094 and 2013, and inserting 2094, 2013, 2270, 2016, or 2322, 2016. And I'm assuming those are some sort of amendments or whatever, and then the years being assigned to them. Anyway, 3. Foreign person. Section 3 of the North Korea Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9202, is amended. A. By redesignating paragraphs 5 through 14 as paragraphs 6 through 15, respectively, and B. By inserting after paragraph 4 the following new paragraph. 5. Foreign person. The term foreign person means A. An individual who is not a United States citizen or an alien lawfully admitted for permanent residence to the United States, or B. An entity that is not a United States person. 4. Luxury goods. Paragraph 9 of Section 3 of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9202, is redesignated by paragraph 3 of this subsection as amended. A. In subparagraph A, by striking quote and at the end. B. In subparagraph B, by striking the period at the end and inserting and C, by adding at the end the following new subparagraph. C. Also includes any items so designated under an applicable United Nations Security Council resolution, i.e. cryptocurrencies. 5. North Korean person. Section 3 of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9202, as amended by paragraph 3 of this section, is further amended. A. By redesignating paragraphs 13 through 15 as paragraphs 14 through 16 respectively, and B. By inserting after paragraph 12 the following new paragraph. 13. North Korean person. The term North Korean person means A. A North Korean citizen or national, or B. An entity owned or controlled by the government of North Korea or by a North Korean citizen or national. B. Definitions for purposes of this act. In this title, number 1, applicable United Nations Security Council resolution, luxury goods. I wonder if that counts Dennis Rodman. The terms, quote, applicable United States Security Council resolution and, quote, luxury goods have the meanings given those terms respectively in Section 3 of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9202, as amended by subsection A. 2. Appropriate congressional committees. Government of North Korea, United States person. The terms appropriate congressional committees, Government of North Korea, and United States person have the meanings given those terms respectively in Section 3 of the North Korea Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9202. 3. Foreign person. North Korean person. The terms foreign person and North Korean person have the meanings given those terms respectively in paragraph 5 and paragraph 13 of Section 3 of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, US 22 U.S.C. 9202.5 and 9202.13, as amended by subsection A. 4. Prohibited weapons program. The term, quote, prohibited weapons program means A. Any program related to the development of nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons and their means of delivering, including ballistic missiles, and B. Any program to develop related materials with respect to a program described in subparagraph A. Subtitle A. Sanctions to enforce and implement United Nations Security Council sanctions against North Korea. Section 311. Modification and expansion of requirements for the designation of persons. A. Expansion of mandatory descriptions or designations. Section 104A of the North Korea Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9214A is amended. Number 1, in paragraph 9 by striking or and inserting or any defense article or defense service as terms are defined in Section 47 of the Arms Export Control Act, 22 U.S.C. 2794. 2, by redesignating paragraph 10 as paragraph 15. 3, by inserting after paragraph 9 the following new paragraphs. 10. Knowingly, directly, or indirectly purchases or otherwise acquires from North Korea any significant amounts of gold, titanium ore, vanadium ore, copper, silver, nickel, zinc, or rare earth minerals. 11. Knowingly, directly, or indirectly sells or transfers to North Korea any significant amounts of rocket aviation or jet fuel, except for use by a civilian passenger aircraft outside of North Korea, exclusively for consumption during its flight to North Korea or its return flight. Wow. 12. Knowingly, directly or indirectly provides significant amounts of fuel or supplies, provides bunkering services, or facilitates a significant transaction or transactions to operate or maintain a vessel or aircraft that is designed under an applicable executive order or an applicable United Nations Security Council resolution, or that is owned or controlled by a person designated under an applicable executive order or applicable United Nations Security Council resolution. 13. Knowingly, directly or indirectly insures, registers, facilitates the registration of or maintains insurance or registration for a vessel owned or controlled by the government of North Korea, except as specifically approved by the United Nations Security Council. 14. Knowingly, directly or indirectly maintains a correspondent account as defined in Section 201A D1 with any North Korean financial institution except as specifically approved by the United Nations Security Council, or, and 4, in paragraph 15 as so redesignated by striking 9 and inserting 14. B. Expansion of additional discretionary designations. Number 1. In general, Section 104B1 of the North Korea Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9214B1 is amended. A. In subparagraph A by striking, quote, pursuant to an applicable United Nations Security Council resolution, and inserting the following, quote, pursuant to 1. An applicable United Nations Security Council resolution, 2. Any regulation promulgated under Section 404, or number 3. Any applicable executive order. So they're involving the president in that decision making. B. In subparagraph B3 by striking, quote, or at the end, and C in subparagraph C by striking the period at the end and inserting a semicolon, and D by adding at the end the following new subparagraphs. D. Knowingly, directly, or indirectly purchased or otherwise acquired from the government of North Korea significant quantities of coal, iron, or iron ore in excess of the limitations provided in applicable United Nations Security Council resolutions. E. Knowingly, directly, or indirectly purchased or otherwise acquired significant types or amounts of textiles from the government of North Korea. F. Knowingly facilitated a significant transfer of funds or property of the government of North Korea that materially contributes to any violation of an applicable United National Security Council resolution. G. Knowingly or directly or indirectly facilitated a significant transfer to or from the government of North Korea of bulk cash, precious metals, gemstones, or other stores of value not described under subsection A10, cryptocurrencies. H. Knowingly, directly or indirectly sold, transferred, or otherwise provided significant amounts of crude oil, condensates, refined petroleum or other types of petroleum or petroleum byproducts, liquefied natural gas, or other natural gas resources to the government of North Korea, except for heavy fuel oil, gasoline, or diesel fuel for humanitarian use or is accepted under subsection A11. 1. Knowingly or indirectly knowingly, directly, or indirectly engaged in, facilitated, or was responsible for the online commercial activities of the government of North Korea, including online gambling. J. Knowingly, directly, or indirectly purchased or otherwise acquired fishing rights from the government of North Korea. What? I can't fish in North Korea? Fuck you! K. Knowingly, directly, or indirectly purchased or otherwise acquired significant types or amounts of food or agricultural products from the government of North Korea. Man, you're cutting off my weed supply. You know that, don't you? L. Knowingly, directly, or indirectly engaged in, facilitated, or was responsible for the exportation of workers from North Korea in a manner intended to generate significant revenue, directly or indirectly, for use by the government of North Korea or by the Workers' Party of Korea. M. Knowingly conducted a significant transaction or transactions in North Korea's transportation, mining, energy, or financial services industry, or N, except as specifically approved by the United Nations Security Council and other than through a correspondent account as described in subsection A14, knowingly facilitated the operation of any branch, subsidiary, or office of a North Korean financial institution. Number 2, effective date. The amendments made by paragraph 1 take effect on the date of the enactment of this act and apply with respect to conduct described in subparagraphs D through N of subsection 104B1 of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016 as added by paragraph 1, engaged in on or after such date of enactment. C. Mandatory and discretionary asset blocking. Section 104C of the North Korea Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9214C, is amended. Number 1, by striking, quote, of a designated person and inserting, quote, of a person designated under subsection A. Number 2, by striking, quote, the President and inserting the following. Number 1, mandatory asset blocking dash the President, and number 3, by adding at the end the following new paragraph. Number 2, Discretionary asset blocking. The President may also exercise such powers in the same manner and to the same extent described in paragraph 1 with respect to a person designated under subsection B. D. Designation of additional persons. Number 1. In general. Not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this act, the President shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report including a determination as to whether reasonable grounds exist and an explanation of the reasons for any determination that such grounds do not exist, to designate, pursuant to Section 104 of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9214, as amended by this section, each of the following. A. The Korea Shipowners Protection and Indemnity Association, a North Korean insurance company with respect to facilitating imports, exports, and re-exports of arms and related material to and from North Korea, or for other activities prohibited by such Section 104. B. Chinpo Shipping Company, Private Limited, a Singapore corporation with respect to facilitating imports, exports, and re-exports of arms and related material to and from North Korea. C. The Central Bank of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, with respect to the sale of gold to, the receipt of gold from, or the import or export of gold by the government of North Korea. D. Kumgang Economic Development Corporation, KKG, with respect to being an entity controlled by Bureau 39 of the Workers' Party of the Government of North Korea. E. Sampa, also known as Zhu Jinghao, Zhu Songhoi, Hua, or Se Muksu, Samo, Sampa, or Sam King, and any entities owned or controlled by such individual with respect to transactions with KKG. You know who you got to talk to now. F. The Chamber of Commerce of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, with respect to the exportation of workers in violation of Section 104A5 or of Section 104B1M of such act as amended by subsection B of this section. Number 2. Form. The report submitted under paragraph 1 may contain a classified annex. Section 312. Prohibition on indirect correspondent accounts. A. In general. Title 2 of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9221, is amended by inserting after Section 201 the following new section. Section 201A, Prohibition on Indirect Correspondent Accounts. A. In general, except as provided in subsection B, if a United States financial institution has or obtains knowledge that a correspondent account established, maintained, administered, or managed by that institution for a foreign financial institution is being used by the foreign financial institution to provide significant financial services indirectly to any person, foreign government, or financial institution designated under Section 104, the United States financial institution shall ensure that such correspondent account is no longer used to provide such services. B. Exception. Dash. A United States financial institution is authorized to process transfers of funds to or from North Korea or for the direct or indirect benefit of any person, foreign government, or financial institution that is designated under Section 104 only if The transfer, number 1, arises from and is ordinarily incident and necessary to give effect to an underlying transaction that has been authorized by a specific or general license issued by the Secretary of the Treasury, and 2, does not involve debiting or crediting a North Korean account. C. Definitions. In this section, number 1, correspondent account. The term correspondent account has the meaning given to that term in section 5318A of Title 31 United States Code. Number 2, United States financial institution. The term United States financial institution has the meaning given that term in section 510.310 of Title 31 Code of Federal Regulations as in effect on the date of the enactment of this section. 3. Foreign financial institution. The term foreign financial institution has the meaning given to that term in section 1010.605 of Title 31 Code of Federal Regulations as in effect on the date of the enactment of this section. B. Clerical amendment. The table of contents in Section 1B of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016 is amended by inserting after the item relating to Section 201 the following new item. Section 201A, Prohibition on Indirect Correspondent Accounts. Section 313, Limitations on Foreign Assistance to Non-Compliant Governments. Section 203 of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9223 is amended. Number 1. In subsection B.A. in the heading by striking transactions in lethal military equipment and inserting, quote, transactions in defense articles or defense services. B. In paragraph 1 by striking, quote, that provides lethal military equipment to the government of North Korea and inserting, quote, that provides to or receives from the government of North Korea a defense article or defense service, as such terms are defined in Section 47 of the Arms Export Control Act, 22 U.S.C. 2794, if the President determines that a significant type or amount of such article or service has been provided or received, and, scrolling down, C in paragraph 2, by striking, quote, 1 year and inserting, quote, 2 years. 2. In subsection D, by striking, quote, or emergency and inserting, quote, maternal and child health, disease prevention and response, or, and 3. By adding at the end the following new subsection, quote, E, report on arms trafficking involving North Korea. Quote, 1. In general, not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this subsection, and annually thereafter for 5 years, the Secretary of State shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report that specifically describes the compliance of the compliance of foreign countries and other foreign jurisdictions with the requirement to curtail the trade described in subsection B1. Number 2. Form. The report required under paragraph 1 shall be submitted to unclassified form, but may contain a classified annex. Section 314, Amendments to Enhance Inspection Authorities. Title II of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9221, as amended by Section 102 of this Act, is further amended by striking Section 205 and inserting the following. Section 205, Enhanced Inspection Authorities. A. Report required. Number 1. In general, not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this section and annually thereafter for 5 years, the President shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report, number A, identifying the operators of foreign seaports and airports that knowingly, number 1, significantly fail to implement or enforce regulations to inspect ships, aircraft, cargo, or conveyances in transit to or from North Korea as required to applicable United Nations Security Council resolutions. Number 2, facilitate the transfer, transshipment, or conveyance of significant types or quantities of cargo vessels or aircraft owned or controlled by persons designated under applicable United Nations Security Council resolutions. Or 3, facilitate any of the activities described in Section 104A. B, describing the extent to which the requirements of applicable United Nations Security Council resolutions to deregister any vessel owned, controlled, or operated by or on behalf of the government of North Korea have been implemented by other foreign countries. C, describing the compliance of the Islamic Republic of Iran with the sanctions mandated in applicable United Nations Security Council resolutions. D, identifying vessels, aircraft, and conveyances owned or controlled by the Reconnaissance General Bureau of the Workers' Party of Korea. And E, describing the diplomatic and enforcement efforts by the President to secure the full implementation of the applicable United Nations Security Council resolutions as described in subparagraphs A through C. 2. Form. The report required under paragraph 1 shall be submitted in unclassified form but may contain a classified annex. B. Specific findings. Each report required under subsection A shall include specific findings with respect to the following ports and airports. Number 1, the ports of Dandong, Dalian, and any other port in the People's Republic of China that the President deems appropriate. Number 2, the ports of Abadan, Bandar-e-Abbas, Chabahar, Bandar-e-Khomeini, Bushehr Port, Kish, Karg Island, Bandar-e-Lenj, and Karam Shahar, and Tehran Imam and Khomeini International Airport in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Number 3, ports of Nokodka, Vanino, and Vladivostok in the Russian Federation. I'm sorry on the pronunciation of this stuff. It's just, I'm American. 4, the ports of Latakia, Benias, and Tartous, and Damascus International Airport, and the Syrian Arab Republic. C, enhanced security targeting requirements. Number 1, in general, except as provided in paragraph 2, the Secretary of Homeland Security may, using a layered approach, require enhanced screening procedures to determine whether physical inspections are warranted of any cargo bound for or landed in the United States that A, has been transported through a seaport or airport, the operator of which has been identified by the President in accordance with subsection A1 as having repeatedly failed to comply with applicable United Nations Security Council resolutions. Quote, B, is aboard a vessel or aircraft or within a conveyance that has, within the last 365 days, entered the territory or waters of North Korea or landed in any of the seaports or airports of North Korea. Or C, is registered by a country or jurisdiction whose compliance has been identified by the President as deficient, pursuant to subsection A2. 2. Exemption for food, medicine, and humanitarian shipments. Paragraph 1 shall not apply to any vessel, aircraft, or conveyance that has entered the territory or waters of North Korea or landed in any of the seaports or airports of North Korea exclusively for the purposes described in Section 208B3B, or to import food, medicine, or supplies into North Korea to meet the humanitarian needs of the North Korean people. D. Seizure and forfeiture. A vessel, aircraft, or conveyance used to facilitate any of the activities described in Section 104A under the jurisdiction of the United States may be seized and forfeited or subject to forfeiture under Number 1, Chapter 46, Title 18 United States Code, or Number 2, Part 5 of Title 4 of the Tariff Act of 1930, 19 U.S.C. 1581. Section 315, enforcing compliance with United Nations shipping sanctions against North Korea. A. In general, the Ports and Waterways Safety Act, 33 U.S.C. 1221, is amended by adding at the end the following new section. Section 16, Prohibition on Entry and Operation. A. Prohibition. Number 1. In general, except as otherwise provided in this section, no vessel described in subsection B may enter or operate in the navigable waters of the United States or transfer cargo in any port or place under the jurisdictions of the United States. Number 2. Limitations on application. A. In general, the prohibition under paragraph 1 shall not apply with respect to 1. A vessel described in subsection B1 if the Secretary of State determines that 1. The vessel is owned or operated by or on behalf of a country the government of which the Secretary of State determines is closely cooperating with the United States with respect to implementing the applicable United Nations Security Council resolutions, as such term is defined in Section 3 of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, or 2. It is in the national security interest not to apply the prohibition to such vessel, or Number 2, a vessel described in subsection B2 if the Secretary of State determines that the vessel is no longer registered as described in that subsection. B. Notice. Not later than 15 days after making a determination under subparagraph A, the Secretary of State shall submit to the Committee on Foreign Affairs and Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure of the House of Representatives and the Committee on Foreign Relations and the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation of the Senate written notice of the determination and the basis upon which determination was made. C. Publication. The Secretary of State shall publish a notice in the Federal Register of such determination made under subparagraph A. B. Vessels described. A vessel referred to in subsection A is a foreign vessel for which a notice of arrival is required to be filed under Section 4A5, and that, Number 1, is the most recent list of vessels published in Federal Register under subsection C2, or Number 2, more than 180 days after the publication of such list is knowingly registered pursuant to the 1958 Convention on the High Seas, entered into force on September 30th, 1962, by a government the agents or instrumentalities of which are maintaining a registration of a vessel that is included on such list. C. Information and publication. The Secretary of the Department in which the Coast Guard is operating with the concurrence of the Secretary of State shall, Number 1, maintain timely information on the registrations of all vessels over 300 gross tons that are known to be A. owned or operated by or on behalf of the government of North Korea or a North Korean person. B. owned or operated by or on behalf of any country in which a seaport is located, the operator of which the President has identified in the most recent report submitted under Section 205A1A of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, or C. quote, owned or operated by or on behalf of any country identified by the President as a country that is not complied with the applicable United Nations Security Council resolutions as such term is defined in Section 3 of such act, and number 2, not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this section, and periodically thereafter publish the Federal Register a list of the vessels described in paragraph 1, and D, notification of governments. 1. In general, the Secretary of State shall notify each government the agents or instrumentalities of which are maintaining a registration of a foreign vessel that is included on a list published under subsection C2, not later than 30 days after such publication, that all vessels registered under such government's authority are subject to subsection A. 2. Additional notification. In the case of a government that continues to maintain a registration for a vessel that is included on such a list after receiving an initial notification under paragraph 1, the Secretary shall issue an additional notification to such government not later than 120 days after the publication of a list under subsection C2. E. Notification of vessels. Upon receiving a notice of arrival under section 4A5 from a vessel described in subsection B, the Secretary of the Department in which the Coast Guard is operating shall notify the master of such vessel that the vessel may not enter or operate in the navigable waters of the United States or transfer cargo in any port or place under the jurisdiction of the United States unless, number 1, the Secretary of State has made a determination under subsection A2, or 2, that the Secretary of the Department in which the Coast Guard is operating allows provisional entry of the vessel or transfer of cargo from the vessel under subsection F. F. Provisional entry or cargo transfer. Notwithstanding any other provision of this section, the Secretary of the Department in which the Coast Guard is operating may allow provisional entry of or transfer of cargo from a vessel in such entry or transfer, if such entry or transfer is necessary for the safety of the vessel or persons aboard. G. Right of innocent passage and right of transit passage. This section shall not be construed as authority to restrict the right of innocent passage or the right of transit passage as recognized under international law. H. Foreign vessel defined. In this section, the term foreign vessel has the meaning given that term in Section 110 of Title 46 United States Code. B. Conforming amendments. Number 1. Special powers. Section 4B2 of the Ports and Waterways Safety Act, 33 U.S.C. 1223B2, is amended by inserting or 16 after, quote, Section 9. 2. Denial of entry. Section 13E of the Ports and Waterways Safety Act, 33 U.S.C. 1232E, is amended by striking, quote, Section 9 and inserting, quote, Section 9 or 16. Section 316, Report on Cooperation between North Korea and Iran. A. In general, not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this act, and annually thereafter for 5 years, the President shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees and leadership a report that includes 1. An assessment of the extent of cooperation, including through the transfer of goods, services, technology, or intellectual property between North Korea and Iran relating to their respective nuclear, ballistic missile development, chemical or biological weapons development, or conventional weapons programs. Number 2. The names of any Iranian or North Korean persons that have knowingly engaged in or directed A. the provision of material support to such programs, or B. the exchange of information between North Korea and Iran with respect to such programs. 3. The names of any other foreign persons that have facilitated the activities described in paragraph 1, and 4. A determination of whether any of the activities described in paragraphs 1 and 2 violate the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2231, 2015. B. Form. The report required under subsection A shall be submitted in unclassified form but may contain a classified annex. C. Appropriate congressional committees and leadership defined. In this section, the term, quote, appropriate congressional committees and leadership means 1. The Committee on Foreign Relations, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, and the majority and minority leaders of the Senate, and number 2, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Committee on Financial Services, the Committee on Ways and Means, and the Speaker, the majority leader, and minority leader of the House of Representatives. Section 317, Report on Implementation of United Nations Security Council Resolutions by Other Governments. A. In general, not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this Act, and annually thereafter for 5 years, the President shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees and leadership a report that evaluates the degree to which the governments of other countries have knowingly failed to, number 1, close the representative offices of persons designated under applicable United Nations Security Council resolutions, number 2, expel any North Korean nationals, including diplomats, working on behalf of such persons. Number 3. Prohibit the opening of new branches, subsidiaries, or representative offices of North Korean financial institutions within the jurisdictions of such governments. Or number 4. Expel any representatives of North Korean financial institutions. B. Form. The report required under subsection A shall be submitted in unclassified form, but may contain a classified annex. C. Appropriate congressional committees and leadership defined. In this section, the term appropriate congressional committees and leadership means: number 1, the Committee on Foreign Relations, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, and the majority and minority leaders of the Senate, and number 2, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Committee on Financial Services, the Committee on Ways and Means, and the Speaker, the majority leader and minority leader of the House of Representatives. Section 318, Briefing on Measures to Deny Specialized Financial Messaging Services to Designated North Korean Financial Institutions. A. In general, not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this Act, and every 180 days thereafter for 5 years, the President shall provide to the appropriate congressional committees a briefing that includes the following information. Number 1. A list of each person or foreign government the President has identified that directly provides specialized financial messaging services to, or enables or facilitates direct or indirect access to such messaging services for A. Any North Korean financial institution, as such term is defined in Section 3 of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9202, designated under an applicable United Nations Security Council resolution, or B. any other North Korean person on behalf of such a North Korean financial institution. Number 2, a detailed assessment of the status of efforts by the Secretary of the Treasury to work with the relevant authorities in the home jurisdictions of such specialized financial messaging providers to end such provision or access. B. Form. The briefing required under Section A may be classified. Subtitle B. Sanctions with respect to human rights abuses by the government of North Korea. Section 321. Sanctions for forced labor and slavery overseas of North Koreans. Why do we give a fuck about that with the goddamn private prison industry here? We've got slavery here. Section 321. Sanctions for forced labor and slavery overseas of North Koreans. A. Sanctions for trafficking in persons. Number 1. In general. Section 302B of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9241B, is amended. A. In paragraph 1 by striking quote and at the end. B. In paragraph 2 by striking the period at the end and inserting quote and C. By adding at the end the following new paragraph. Quote 3. A list of foreign persons that knowingly employ North Korean laborers as described in Section 104B1M. 2. Additional determinations. Reports. With respect to any country identified in Section 302B2 of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9241B2, is amended by paragraph 1. The report required under Section 302A of such act shall A. include a determination whether each person identified in Section 302B3 of such act, as amended by paragraph 1, who is a national or a citizen of such identified country, meets the criteria for sanctions under number 1, Section 111 of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, 22 U.S.C. 7108, relating to the prevention of trafficking in persons, or 2, Section 104A or 104B1 of the North Korea Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9214A, as amended by Section 101 of this Act. B. Be included in the report required under Section 110B of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, 22 U.S.C. 7107B, relating to the annual report on trafficking in persons, and C. Be considered in any determination that the government of such country has made serious and sustained efforts to eliminate severe forms of trafficking in persons, as such term is defined for purposes in the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. B. Sanctions on foreign persons that employ North Korean labor. Number 1. In general. Title III of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9241, is amended by inserting after Section 302 the following new sections. Section 302A. Rebuttable presumption applicable to goods made with North Korean labor. A. In general, except as provided in subsection B, any significant goods, wares, articles, and merchandise mined, produced, or manufactured wholly or in part by the labor of North Korean nationals or citizens shall be deemed to be prohibited under Section 307 of the Tariff Act of 1930, 19 U.S.C. 1307, and shall not be entitled to entry at any of the ports of the United States. B. Exception. The prohibition described in subsection A shall not apply if the Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection finds, by clear and convincing evidence, that the goods, wares, articles, or merchandise described in such paragraph were not produced under convict labor, forced labor, or indentured labor under penal sanctions. I wonder if other people have those kind of restrictions against our products. Section 302B, Sanctions on Foreign Persons Employing North Korean Labor. A. In general, except as provided in subsection C, the President shall designate any person identified under Section 302B3 for the imposition of sanctions under subsection B. B. Imposition of sanctions. 1. In general, the President shall impose these sanctions described in paragraph 2 with respect to any person designated under subsection A. 2. Sanctions described. The sanctions described in this paragraph are sanctions pursuant to the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S.C. 1701, to block and prohibit all transactions in property and interests in property of a person designated under subsection A, if such property and interests in property are in the United States, come within the United States, or are in or come within the possession or control of a United States person. Exception. Number 1. In general, a person may not be designated under subsection A if the President certifies to the appropriate congressional committees that the President has received reliable assurances from such person that A. The employment of North Korean laborers does not result in the direct or indirect transfer of convertible currency, luxury goods, or other stores of value to the government of North Korea. B. All wages and benefits are provided directly to the laborers and are held as applicable in accounts within the jurisdiction in which they reside in locally denominated currency. And C. The laborers are subject to working conditions consistent with international standards. 2. Recertification. Not later than 180 days after the date on which the President transmits to the appropriate congressional committees an initial certification under paragraph 1, and every 180 days thereafter, the President shall A. Transmit a recertification stating that the conditions described in such paragraph continue to be met, or B. If such recertification cannot be transmitted, impose the sanctions described in subsection B beginning on the date on which the President determines that such recertification cannot be transmitted. 2. Clerical amendment. The table of contents in Section 1B of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016 is amended by inserting after the item relating to Section 302 the following new items. Section 302A, rebuttable presumption applicable to goods made with North Korean labor. Section 302B, sanctions on foreign persons employing North Korean labor. Section 322, modifications to sanctions, suspension, and waiver authorities. A. Exemptions. Section 208A of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9228A is amended in the matter preceding paragraph 1 by inserting 201A after, quote, 104, and 2 by inserting, quote, 302A, 302B after, quote, 209. B. Humanitarian waiver. Section 208B of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9228B1 is amended. 1. By inserting, quote, 201A after 104, after quote 104 in each place it appears, and 2, by inserting quote 302A, 302B after quote 209B in each place it appears. C. Waiver. Section 208C of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9228C, is amended in the matter preceding paragraph 1, by inserting quote 201A after quote 101, and 2, by inserting quote 302A, 302B after quote 209B. And scrolling down, we're on the last page here. Section 323, Reward for Informants. Rat on your friends! Section 36B of the State Department Basic Authorities Act of 1956, 22 U.S.C. 2708B, is amended, number 1, in paragraph 9 by striking quote or at the end. Number 2, in paragraph 10 by striking the period at the end and inserting a semicolon, and 3, by adding at the end the following new paragraphs. Quote 11. The identification or location of any person who, while acting at the direction of or under the control of a foreign government, aids or abets a violation of Section 1030 of Title 18, United States Code, or 12, the disruption of financial mechanisms of any person who has engaged in the conduct described in Sections 104A or 104B1 of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 2914, or B1. Section 324. Determination on designation of North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. A. Determination. Number 1. In general, not later than 90 days after the date of the enactment of this act, the Secretary of State shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a determination whether North Korea meets the criteria for designation as a state sponsor of terrorism. Number 2. Form. The determination required by paragraph 1 shall be submitted in unclassified form, but may include a classified annex, if appropriate. B. State sponsor of terrorism defined. For purposes of this section, the term, quote, state sponsor of terrorism means a country, the government of which the Secretary of State has determined for purposes of Section 6J of the Export Administration Act of 1979, 50 U.S.C. 4605J, as in effect pursuant to the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, Section 620A of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, 22 U.S.C. 2371, Section 40 of the Arms Export Control Act, 22 U.S.C. 2780, or any other provision of law, is a government that has repeatedly provided support for acts of international terrorism. Subtitle C. General Authorities. Section 331. Authority to consolidate reports. Any reports required to be submitted to the appropriate congressional committees under this title, or any amendment made by this title that are subject to deadlines for submission consisting of similar units of time, may be consolidated into a single report that is submitted to appropriate congressional committees pursuant to the earlier of such deadlines. The consolidated reports must contain all information required under this title or any amendment made by this title, in addition to all other elements mandated by previous law. Section 332. Rule of Construction. Nothing in this title shall be construed to limit, number 1, the authority or obligation of the President to apply the sanctions described in Section 104 of the North Korean Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act of 2016, 22 U.S.C. 9214, as amended by 311 of this Act, with regard to persons who meet the criteria for designation under such section or in any other provision of law, or number 2, the authorities of the President pursuant to the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 USC 1701, Section 333, Regulatory Authority. A. In general, the President shall, not later than 180 days after the date of enactment of this Act, promulgate regulations as necessary for the implementation of this title and the amendments made by this title. B. Notification to Congress. Not fewer than 10 days before the promulgation of a regulation under subsection A, the President shall notify and provide to the appropriate congressional committees the proposed regulation specifying the provisions of this title or the amendments made by this title that the regulation is implementing. Section 334. Limitation on funds. No additional funds are authorized to carry out the requirements of this title or of the amendments made by this title. Such requirements shall be carried out by using amounts otherwise authorized. And we have officially come to the end of it, my friends. A minute over time, but we did make it. We did finally vanquish the beast. And so it's with that I'd like to bid you a fair fondue. And Monday, we're probably going to be reading the amended Verge Black paper. Not entirely certain on that. I've got a couple things up in the air for Monday, and so that may in fact be where we go. And so wish me luck. I'm going to be going to Slayer this evening. And I'll be, I haven't posted the part 2, but I'll be posting that along with part 3 here, the one we just completed here of HB 3364, as we have finally completed it. And so Monday, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we will be back again on radiocrypto.com. Until then, you can find me in the Telegram for Verge Currency. Also, you can find me on Twitter, DJ erock23, also on Facebook, and on YouTube. And you can find me under Frank Dashwood there as well. And so I want y'all to have an excellent weekend. And until Monday, I want y'all to do your homework. Trade safe. Got my order of ops all fucked up. Trade safe. I want you to do your homework. I want you to watch out for your bunghole, because nobody else is going to do it for you. Thank you very much for listening, and you all have an excellent weekend. And as far as our last dance, Divide and Conquer off 0 Days here on Coin Metal.